of the essay, the brown shirts and the torch-like processions, frightening and very powerful impression we all see in the films, Reappraisal and all that. We forget that was a front, that was a cover. Hitler certainly backed that and said we want as much excitement as we can on the streets. We want to attack Jews and communists. Yes, we keep pushing that. But our future lies in winning power through the process of electoral game. How? Because, and he read into the Constitution, he read of the Constitution in this way, that it was structured to create the greatest level of democracy in Europe. That's a fascinating irony again. The Weimar Constitution is the most democratic constitution ever in European history, I would contend. It was based on multi-party notions. Everybody who has a claim to political influence will have a chance to represent him, herself, in the party structure. Of course, we now know that it's the great weakness of Weimar, that because of the multi-party structure, it never developed a proper central body, other than coalition, that could govern effectively. Had Weimar not been so in love with democracy, difficult to see how the Nazis could have made the progress they did, unless they'd done it by revolution, and it seems they couldn't do that, if we take Munich as the example. So Weimar, and the notion of genuine democracy working post-war, is the means by which Nazism comes to power. It's not a seizure of power. It's not the essay that seized power. Frightening though they were on the streets, and very willing as they were to bash and beat communists and Jews, that was all a front. For Hitler, the real aim was to win enough electoral support to make himself indispensable. Now, he was gambling, as many of his supporters said. What happens if it doesn't work this way? And he had enough self-confidence, which he again imposed on others, if you wish, to say it is going to happen that way. And again, the great good fortune of the late 1920s with the Depression, his particular brand of politics became popular, again in a minority sense, of course, because of the troubles that Germany is going through. Had there been no Depression, it's an absurd thing to say, no, but let's speculate for a moment. Had there been no Depression, where would the lien, where would the leverage have come for Nazism? Difficult to see. Difficult to see. He depended upon Germany going through crises, and of course they come along. And he uses the providential onset of crises to great effect, and puts himself in a position where, because he's the only politician of real note, it's another extraordinary piece of history, isn't it? There was no, apart from Stresemann, I think we could exclude there is no figure of a charisma and a quality that Adolf Hitler represents. It's one of those twists of history. There's nobody around of his quality to match him. I say Stresemann might have done, but he dies too soon. And dies saying, after me the deluge, in effect, Stresemann said. You know, I'm the last barrier between ourselves and barbarism. And how right he was. But there's no other Stresemann. It's rather like, I don't know if this is a fair analogy, when you look at Russia, up to 1917, if there had been somebody other than Nicholas II, his father or his grandfather, or Nicholas I, would there have been a Russian Revolution? Probably not. I mean, I don't know what would have happened, turmoil of some kind. But at the wrong time, the wrong men are in authority, or the right men aren't around. And that's one of the fascinations of it. So this notion, you still read in all of the school textbooks around, in some way Hitler is driven to power by the logic of his own demands, and he progresses from A to B to C. It doesn't happen that way. He's a gambler. He's an opportunist. A skilled one, but he plays on luck, and luck falls his way. Luck falls his way. Ideas don't count if the circumstances aren't right for the ideas to apply. Intellectualism never works. You need circumstance. And of course Hitler is extremely fortunate. He has a circumstance which he can then exploit. I mean, he went into deep moods of depression in the 20s, where he thought it was a lost cause. The economy was too strong, or Germany had recovered too well. But, I say, fortune favoured him, and his party was in a position to exert itself when the Depression set in the late 20s. I've mentioned there, I won't spend over long on this, the sexuality bit, but I thought it worth mentioning in terms of the myth. You will read some of the more scurrilous accounts of Hitler's career, and you see it on TV in some of the programmes, that he was in some way a perverted wretch who indulged in the most heinous offences. he was the archetypal asexual. There is no record of Hitler ever engaging in a sexual activity at all. Now, he had women friends, and he admired women, he was very obsessive with them, but he, as far as we can tell, there is no evidence to suggest that he ever engaged in sexual activity. Now, I throw this in, not as a sort of Daily Mirror. You know the Daily Mirror, the Sun? Anyway, they're British newspapers that tend to titillate somewhat. There's no sense of that in this reference. The reason I mention it is that quite a striking book came out early in the new millennium, 2001, by Lothar Machtan, a German scholar, in which he did a very clever, brilliant piece of analysis, you could say, in which he likened, or he related all Hitler's major policy moves to his suppressed homosexuality. Brilliantly argued, it's all tosh. There is no corroborative evidence to back it. It reads well, and you think, oh, we've got something here. But no, it's all surmise, it's all speculation. And I don't think many scholars give it much room now. But it's a good read, and it does make you think. You think, oh yes, that fits. I mean, one notion, which you may have come across, is that he became very anti-Jewish because his mother, who died from cancer, was badly treated by a Jewish doctor, and that she died early because of the maltreatment. No evidence of this at all. The only evidence we have Hitler writing a letter to the doctor saying, "Thank you, doctor, for all the efforts you put in to save my dear mother's life." There is no suggestion that he was turned into an Arabian anti-Semite by his mother's death. But those sort of notions are hard to get rid of once they become popular. The popular notion, the sort of folklore. But I would just throw that in, that his sexuality is rather tedious and rather dull and won't take you very far if you pursue it. Prove me wrong if you can find the evidence, but up to now, it's all been speculation and surmise. Interesting though it is. So the perversions, which I mean, I've been to schools in Britain and kids have asked me questions about his perversions. And I said, where'd you get this from? And they said, oh, well, it's from a comic or whatever. But it's a powerful notion that can seep through to 15, 16, 17-year-olds. But dismiss it, is my advice. There is no reference to him that's corroborated that he was other than totally asexual. He did not engage. So his career is not a reaction to his sexual failures or whatever. As I say, that may be open to further analysis, but I don't think the evidence is there. The great book now on this aspect, if you want to trace it through at all, is Thomas Weber, who wrote a very good study of Hitler in the First World War. It's called Hitler's First War, in which he dismisses all the accounts of Hitler's sexual activity by saying it's all propaganda later used by his opponents, or by his Nazi internal enemies, like the Strassers, who used some very flimsy evidence to try and portray this idea of Hitler being a perverted leader. But the record doesn't match. Now let's come to, I better finish here in the next few minutes. The biggie, which gives us our title really, which we try to lead towards, this working towards the Führer. If you know your German studies, you'll know there's a fascinating line of thought now that argues that Hitler was not really the master of the situation after 1933. He's very much the subject of the situation, and he responded to events rather than shaping them. This intentionalist argument versus structuralism. And the basic argument, simplifying it very much here, is that Hitler in power delegated to the extent that he very rarely made decisions. What happens is that officials, working towards the Führer, as the expression was, try to judge what he would like, what he would want, what he would do. They produce programs and policies and then say, this has the power of the Führer's notion, ideas. And if that can be bought by the others, it goes through. If you get the ear of Hitler, if you get a conference with him, a conversation with him, which is very difficult, because he was surrounded by groups who kept people away, if you get close to him, you could claim that he had given his permission or his authority to a policy. We now think that probably it was very deliberate, that he wanted to diffuse power so that he never got real opposition forming against him. So that he played off departments against each other. He wanted rows between Goering and others. He didn't want a united cabinet, for example, under him. Not that he paid much attention to his cabinet, very rarely met. But his way of preventing opposition forming was to diffuse power.